So do you want to see something, just a couple things I pulled together for you tonight based on looking at the homework? Now, first of all, where I'm going to start is while the data analytics, business analytics seems to be overwhelming part of the course, and it substitutes as a major exam, right? It's what we call experiential learning. I was telling Wendy, it's supposed to stretch you a little. I give you solutions, but you also kind of have to go in and do a little research, right? That's not unlike how you're going to practice as a CPA, right? Or because your clients will come in, they have different processes, different systems. You might not be communicating on the same channel, right? So you have to go out and research, right? One of the most I thought it was amusing feedback I ever got on one of my evals in an AIS class was, why does professor make us download so many softwares, right? That's what AIS people do. That's what accountants do now. So you're taking this class for really two reasons. One, it's now required by the state of Maryland. So the state of Maryland has something called COMAR rules for licensure, for CPA, all CPA curriculum, whether you're going to, excuse me, all accounting curriculum, whether you're going for a CPA or not. And information systems is one. And then if you are going for the CPA exam, ISC is one of the focus ones on the CPA exam. And the reading, creating, and visualizing data is now dispersed. One, it has its own section, a focus section, but it's also dispersed. Okay, so this is why we're here, just in case you were still, when chapter 13 gets so hard, you're like, why am I here? That's why you're here. It's going to pay off. So let me just go over a couple things. I'm going to share my screen and then we'll have some discussion. But I want to just talk a little bit about what kind of questions you might be up against if you're taking the exam. And if you're not, you're doing this for your corporate jobs or your own advancement. These are the really primary focus areas. And you might have read in some of my comments, and I know it's a lot to read. When I took AIS, it was all about software. Are you using QuickBooks? Are you using ERPs didn't even exist, right? It was all about what software are you using? We learned about databases on Microsoft Access, right? Today, it has drifted more toward internal control, right? Because think about why. Cyber attacks, breaches into systems, loss of data. So controllers, right, are now who manage information systems in corporations are need to be more knowledgeable about this and they need to understand controls. I tell a story when did we do backups yet? When you schedule backups in that, I always forget what chapter that's in. When we study that, one story I always tell is when I was a controller, I just assumed the IT person knew that accounting systems had to be backed up, right? And you needed to be able to restore data. And one day I went in to ask to restore the data, and guess what this young man was doing? We were both young people at the same time. He was overwriting all the accounting data day after day after day. Can anybody tell me, is that a problem? Yeah. What's your intuitive thought? Go ahead, just jump in. We don't have a lot of people here. How should he have been backing up that data? He should have had dates, right? I should at least know I could go a month back, 2 months back. He was overwriting the entire master file. So this is about data management, internal controls, system and processing. My day system and the technology would have been on top and the data management at the bottom, and there wouldn't have been anything about internal controls. So these are the areas, right? This talks about the CPA exam, but it applies to work. So when you go through this, if you check them out, if you're thinking, oh, I want to know more about this, or you're going to take ISC as a focus section, right? You still need it for some general, all the other three principal parts, but then you can focus in it, right? Can you answer any of these questions, right? Which of the following controls most likely could prevent computer personnel from modifying programs to bypass program controls, right? Just, we're not going to say right or wrong tonight, but what's the first one that comes to your mind?
Like giving people specific access to what their role is.
Exactly. And there might even be a more precise one here, Alexa, but let the first one come into your mind. Well, if they can't get into the thing, they can't bypass it. If it's not their job to be there, cut them off, right? So role-based. We have things like what initiates the sales process at Warren Sports? Now, probably it shows what? A diagram, a flow chart, and then you have to. It could be something like a quote, right? It can be something like the contract. It depends what we're seeing in the visual, right? So a system analyst is most likely to play what role in AIS, right? So we should start thinking about validity, role checking, use, what are some of the things? Since we don't have access to exam questions anymore, and remember, now we have things like in multiple choice and what they call task-based simulations. So that's why we're trying to give you more hands-on experience. You'll also have access to tools, like you may have access to an Excel spreadsheet while you're taking the exam. But any of these, right? You need to know flow charting if you're a corporate controller, because you might be responsible for documenting the processes in your system. And we talked a lot about ERPs. I'm glad to see so many are using them. That was the fun thing about discussion in this class. So many people are on systems. So we got to chat about that. And it also made me feel like a dinosaur, right? Because I remembered the history of all these, especially QuickBooks, because it came out during the time I was a CPA, and it was considered a nightmare because of no audit trail, right? It was just, now look at how that company, and they took the feedback and they improved. Okay. So when I post this document, the other thing that's in here for you are links to resources. We are a partner with Becker. You're going to see Becker more on campus more. I am a believer in them, and they're going to be working some discounts for them. I just feel that they really focus on what you need to be successful. Many of you, even though you've taken our wonderful courses, will still want to take a review course, because success is just simply practice, practice, practice. It's downright tenacity, right? You will never feel ready to sit for any one part now that you can take them on demand, right? So you just have to say, here's my deadline, I'm going for it no matter what. If you wait around a schedule to be ready, you'll never feel ready. But check out Becker. I liked this one a lot. These are two of them from the AICPA. Go through. This would be more focus sections. So we have the three parts now: auditing, financial accounting and reporting, and regulation. These are what we call the core or foundations, and then you get to select a focus area. Now, this does not mean that CPAs can specialize. If you remember the general rules, CPAs cannot claim a specialty. That gets out kind of in word of mouth, right? And how tasks are allocated in firms. But you have to have a strong foundation, and then you can pick. So I went through this quiz. Now, this is the focus quiz. So this would take you a tiny bit beyond what we're reviewing in this course, although most of the concepts are in the course. This is going to focus a lot on these models, like the COSO model, security models, the internal control questions. So that's another reason, like if you were going to take a review, you probably have all the basics in the software and the data modules. Internal control would be the deeper dive, right? So which of the following right? Can you answer this? Which of the following attributes in the customer table of a relational database could be a primary key? So the way I would think about this question in my head is, where am I likely to see this principal piece of information repeated in other tables that it would tie tables together?
The customer number?
Yeah, the customer number. So you might want to go through these. They're kind of fun to see what you know, detect and analyze attempts to access which of the following controls would be the best, right? So we have validity checks for logins. We have using access control matrix, right? Multi-factor identification. I'm just gonna, right? It'll tell you what's correct and what's not correct. So this just, it's only like 30 questions and it's kind of fun. When you start to see some of these names though, that's the other point that we have to make. Every time the CPA exam, it's always being updated, right? So a lot of these abbreviations and stuff like that, this is a good one to go in and look at those things. They may not have been covered in our textbook because by the time you sit for the exam, they may be obsolete. So I put that one in there for you. The other one is this is about how they use spreadsheets in the exam. This is why I emphasize Excel so much. And then we have another one. This one is actually for review. You can start a free trial, but you can look in any of the sections and look at sample questions. So if we went to accounting information system, a cloud service provider offering infrastructure as a service is most likely to be contractually responsible for maintaining which of the following? Which do you think? So the way I would look at this is, well, software as a service, if you're familiar with that, how far can they reach into your systems, right? Could they reach, not provide, reach into the data is the way I would look at it. So I would say, actually, that's at the bigger level, right? What I really liked about this site is, your first shot, you could go in and be all wrong, but you're going to get support, right? And it's going to give you the kind of things that um, the exam is basing, the materials the exam is basing their question. Okay, so there are just some goodies for you. Just, talk a little bit why we're doing this. I'll post these in the classroom. Um, that is, I would say if we look at this split, I would still say, maybe it would be more like 80 or 85% of your questions are going to be on the uh, the terminology and the technologies and these types of questions. But you're going to still have 15 or 20% spattered throughout the whole exam now. Or if you take the bar section, right, that are going to have to do with data analytics. And actually, we're calling it business analytics now, talk about changes, because for accountants, when you think of data analytics, that's the biggest umbrella. We might be investigating pandemics and a lot of medical things or research. We call it business analytics because we're really looking at the context of business and how we pull data and gather data to make better decisions. So some of you might know that I was involved in setting up the business analytics degree at MC. I get this like, hey, it's all about accounting and business. Well, yeah, because that is the language of our business, and that's the kind of data we're going to use, right, to make decisions. So that's why we're doing. What is the key to these is connecting the fields between your databases. And there still are some people who can't identify what fields would create the join. I never use the term join anymore. I use the term relationship even when I'm working in other programs because that makes more sense, right? So the employer ID and the requester ID, they're actually the same data. Guess what? they're a handshake to each other in those data sets, right? So you need to look at your problem and then oftentimes, to be honest, I find looking at the source data in Tableau onerous, right? It's not as, and I'm going to use the word natural for me as looking at an Excel. So guess what I do? I go back, I open Excel, I start clicking through the fields. I'm like, oh, so that's the same data there, that's the same data. This is what a relationship is about, and this is what's going to drive our data analysis. The author gives you, they leave out some steps too for various reasons. One, to challenge you and stretch you. Two, which we've run into in our individual conversations, all of us may have different versions of Tableau at some point. Same with our clients. We might meet a client, you may be using a desktop at work and the cloud elsewhere, or the public version, right, which is a limited desktop version. Same thing I use. And same thing with Power BI, same thing with Excel, right? So finding where we're at and what it can do. But most of the time, the functionality is still good enough to achieve what we need to achieve. This class has been taught over 4 times, so all this is road tested. I'm just reassuring you now. I say these things up front, they don't kind of mean anything. The last thing we're zooming in on when we get to 17 is the concept of a dashboard. So a dashboard is a collection of charts and graphs and infographics. Now, we haven't even done infographics because that's highly specialized software.
Yeah.
But imagine, so we're working in chapter 10, AP, okay? If you're managing AP, and you wanted to get a group of meaningful pictures together on one page to monitor management of AP, what would you like to see? What key performance metrics or ratios would you want to see? Can't hear you there. Are you on mute?
Days
No,
and
I'm not mute. I was saying that I haven't done that actually. I just started.
So what part of AP do you do?
Presently, I just process bills.
Okay, so you process bills. Do you have to worry about when they're due?
Sorry, come again.
Do you have to worry about what date they're due on?
Yes.
Whether they're due in 30 days or
Oh, yeah,
45
yeah.
days?
Sure. Yeah.
Do you have to worry about whether or not you need to take a discount?
Yes.
Okay. Do you need to, or do you think a manager would be interested in how our average payment time?
Yes.
Yes. These are all pictures you're going to put on a dashboard to manage AP, right? Who's in AR? Anybody?
actually, I am in AR and AP also, and I
Okay.
run both actually at the same system. But
Right. Oh, I remember talking to
yeah,
too.
yeah, but the
Oh
software,
boy, you have it all. So talk
yeah,
about
it's
AR. If you when you're managing AR, what are you concerned about in AR?
definitely the time
Like,
who's paying me, the
right,
invoice,
because time
the
it
invoice they did, yeah,
you need to collect fast, right?
sure.
So think
As
about the ratios. One, you're going to know the total, want to know the total AR. Maybe you'll want to see which is the largest invoice out there, right? The
yes,
next thing you're going to want to see is aging, right?
yes,
How long is it taking customers to pay? You
right,
might want to see the performance metric, your average days outstanding, right?
sure,
Or
sure,
turnover, right?
yes,
So you have learned things about managing these. A dashboard, often the purpose of a dashboard is to help you manage these accounting functions, right? So in 17, we're going to learn what we've learned about individual charts and graphs or visualizations, and we're going to put multiples on one page. This is what Tableau naturally does. Excel does not do it naturally. You have to go through a lot of hoops to do it in Excel. But Tableau or even Power BI, which we're going to explore at the very end of this class, you're going to create a meaningful dashboard. So somebody can go up, look at the visualizations, and get a whole story about the status of, say, your accounts receivables, right? Now, the issue that I'm still seeing in some, although all of you are taking my feedback and getting much better, is this idea of picking the right chart or graph for the data, okay? And so I tell you to experiment, and then you go from not visualizing to using something, I'm just going to say it, too fancy, okay? So we're just gonna talk about, and I just came up with this on my own, 2-second rule in visualizing data, okay? More so now than ever, because you're gonna start to put these individual little charts. And so a reader, and especially your boss, right? Or investors, right? So people they want to see the answer in 2 seconds. They want to see what's important now in 2 seconds. That's a product of our world. So some of us internally, we may still be able to go in and talk to people by showing them the entire Excel data sheet or the entire data set. That is not the way we're communicating nowadays. So when I have said to you, you need to make it stand out, you need the result to stand out, or they need to be able to read it in 2 seconds. So we're just going to do a little experiment here. So the question was, what percentage of tickets submitted belong to the main campus Chicago location? Just at a glance, which one do you think, which visualization is going to give you the answer more quickly? I know they're kind of hard to see, but here are the percentages on this one. They're categories. They're in a pie. This one, here are the categories. Here are the percentages, but it's on a line. Now it's asking you which location, which one makes more sense in terms of presentation?
The pie chart.
Right.
The pie chart, Alexa, right? Can you tell me why?
For me, it's easier to see what location takes up majority of the like pie versus on
Because
the other example, I don't really know what I'm looking at.
I
I
thought the
see
pie
like
chart to
the
show the percentage.
Yeah. So it's not saying, it says what percentage, this is what Jawa did, of the tickets belongs to the main campus. So we have a population, right? I'm using a little technical terms now, but we have a population. We're asking for a percentage of the population, whether it's a pie or a pizza, right? And so to visually see how much space how big that slice is more meaningful than a line which typically tells us trend. Now, did it tell us what is the trend on ticket sales, or how have ticket sales changed over a period of time? Was that the question?
no.
No. So
No.
there really is no trend here. So a line chart is for passage of time, right? A pie chart is for proportional or percents. Okay. If you can't remember, and I put that under the resources to read, but I know there's a lot to read. But this is the question you go back to all your visualizations, right? Even if I gave you 100, right? I might have given you a suggestion. I give hundreds, and I can even give 5 suggestions out of 10, right? But I give you 100. Go back and say, was that the best I could do at that time? Right? Can my reader read that in 2 seconds? Because if I have to go in and pick out detail, right? And perform a calculation, worse yet, that isn't a good visualization. Is this making sense? Raise your hands if it is. Yeah, because I'm like that way too, right? So this was one, this is all we're going to do. You can go back and read the rules, but also just intuitively start to feel it. You are artists. You are storytellers, right? This is the new uh, skill set that accountants need. We need to be storytellers. So this question was, which department had the lowest number of tickets submitted related to login issues? Okay. Now, I presented two here. Which do you think is easier to read? Which can you digest and get the answer in 2 seconds?
The left.
The
The left
the left, yes.
bar chart. Why? Okay. One, and I know, as I said, I know these are sometimes very hard to see because I'm just pulling them. I'm pulling them from classwork over the years, right? So one, what I have said to some of you, if you have a lot of categories, a department is a category. It's not a numerical thing, right? Generally, categories go on the x-axis across. But if you have a long list, you want to flip it and use a bar as opposed to a column or a pie, right? So that it reads down. Because a pie, you might have too many tiny slivers, right? And a column, if you have all these like sales, all the department names across the bottom, it's going to stretch off the page. And my goal in the end might be to put this on a dashboard where I'm going to even have to make it smaller, right? So usually if you have a lot of categories, put it vertically. This person did that. The other is to use the sort feature. Does everybody know where the sort feature is up here? It's these little icons that go up and down, right? So it's going to sort from high to low. All you have to do is, get your pills in the right place, click the way you want to see it. You can also add a label by clicking on label. That way, we at least know immediately that the longest bar is sales, right? So, and the shortest bar is risk management. They want to know what is the lowest number of tickets. It's at the bottom, risk management. Okay. What's the issue with this one? I have to really look, right? One, I have, again, this long list going across the bottom. Okay. Same pills, same everything almost, right? The other is when I see shapes, I want to see relationship of size to shapes. You can't see that here, can you? So you have to go in as a reader and read each of these numbers to finally identify, right, which is the lowest. Okay. So 2-second rule. Okay. Last one. Okay. The question was, for the transactions recorded in the source system, but not in the ERP, in which states were we missing transactions? So now you have 3 options to choose from. Which do you like the most? Which do you like the least? Because sometimes there isn't one, right?
Yeah. I like the map. Yes.
The map. Yeah. So what's the problem with the one on the left?
I think it doesn't really show exactly which state has what transaction. It doesn't really show the state.
Right. So all of the balloons or circles are the same size. So you can't tell proportionately. And this is what a shape is supposed to do. It's supposed to give you comparison, right? So you can't see which any one. There are no labels on it. If they had clicked labels, there might have been an improvement, but I still would have said the size thing bothers me, right? The other option, and does anybody remember what they call these? I forget. Even I forget these things. This one's better, right? Why? Because you can compare size, because there's data labels, okay? But my gosh, we have the ability now to show a map, right? You couldn't do that when I started, right? So I'm going to find any way I can to use a map, right? Now, when you first look at this, okay, at first you're like, well, is there enough distinction there? They put the little meter up at the top, right? That's like a legend. They clicked legend, right? So we know Colorado and Texas are the two states. They have similar data. California is different, right? They could have added one more and put the numbers within the state. But heck, we all, it shows us where we are on the map, okay? If you turned either one of these in, I I would accept that's your artistic, right? It's when they're way off, like some of these. This one, you're going to get feedback on this one because I'm like, I can't really see what's happening there in 2 seconds, right? So these are just the key points between the exam questions and kind of what to focus on. And then when you get to the analytics, right? Why we're doing this, now to head toward our dashboards and tell meaningful stories. And know too, so a question on the exam might be something like you might not have the okay, so I'm using a teacher version, which is very similar to the student version. So the first thing we're going to do is pull in a database. So here, for example, is chapter 10. Um, a couple people wrote me on chapter 10 and they're like, filters don't work, joins don't work, right? The functionality is in there, right? The key is connecting your table. So what are the questions we're dealing with? And that's why I give you instructions to go to the case, right? This is the accounts payable case. So the step one, the reason why I revised the instructions was, this class, it wasn't intuitive, right? And I wanted to say, you know what? One of the big steps in here is what fields you're going to deal with, right? And it also may make more sense if you put your image right next to the question. So here, we're dealing with a lot about AP and a lot about inventory, right? Because we're purchasing inventory usually in AP. So what I'm going to connect here is going to be something like Tableau gives you some hints, right? Notice I got this hint here. So what does it not like, right? Well, it's potentially telling me that I don't have any fields that give each other a handshake. We call those joins or we call them relationships. I call them handshakes, right? So I'm going to want to look at the data again. So I can click to look at the data, but I'm going to go back. I like looking at it, as I said, in my natural Excel view because that's my zone. That's where I'm most comfortable. How many are you most comfortable in Excel, right? So I'm just going to quickly go back and say, this is the source. So I'm more natural in Excel. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to look at the inventory tab. Okay, there's ID. That might be a likely candidate. I'm usually looking for primary keys, right? I'm looking at the AP vendor, right? Vendor ID through and we're looking HR employees. Didn't ask anything about HR. Here is the detail of the AP transactions, right? So we have invoice line ID, that seems useful. We have transaction date. If I go to the AP invoice, we're going to have invoice and vendor ID. So just by looking at these tabs, I can see that my AP vendor table relates better to my AP invoice, and it's going to be my AP invoice detail, okay? That seems to go better with um, my inventory. So I am going to go in and I'm going to correct that. Now that I've looked at it, I can go in and I can correct that joint. Okay. So I'm going to pull this one up just to get rid of it or away. Or I can just click it and remove it. And I'm going to go line items. All right. And then I want to relate it to, it's not giving me an error notice then, but it's asking me to find relationships. It wants help, right? So this is where you want to go in. So you should see that you have the inventory ID. That's the actual SKU or stock number of the item or the vendor's number. And then you have the attached to the other database. So there's where your handshake is. So this is valid at this point. You also know it's valid because down here it says go to the worksheet, right? So it's telling you you have a good handshake. Now, when you go into Tableau, why I say it's natural language is speaking in terms of visualization. Gail, you should be seeing show me up here in this corner, right? So if you're not seeing that, you need to turn it on, okay? So now the question becomes, what can I visualize? For example, question one, in July, payments were made the most number of times for which ingredients? Okay. So, and I'm just going back to my notes on this one, and I'm going to look at, I know there that it's going to have something to do with transaction IDs, right? So when I'm back in Tableau, get to have all these wonderful screens up. I'm going to move my pill up here for the inventory item, right? Inventory name is going to go on rows. Okay. So here again, did I give them feedback on what this is? These ABC? You're missing numbers, right? You're missing an opportunity to tell us something. And the thing it wants to tell us is, basically a number, right, of invoice items here. So we're going to go look at the line ID. So this is a dimensions. If you pick this up in the video, the upper part is the dimension. The lower part is the measure. A measure is a quantity. So I am going to pick up the inventory line ID. When I click on that, I can say convert to measure, right? And it will create the measure. And then I can put that measure up in the columns, right? Now, does this give me the immediate answer? Is it easy to read in 2 seconds? Not really, right? I have to go hunt and peck. So what can I do to it? What can I do to the data? I could apply labels. Okay. Show marks. Do I still have to hunt and peck to answer the question? And the question was, right, July payments, the most number for which ingredient? Right now, we're just going to say, which is the most number for the ingredients, right? I still have to hunt and peck. What can I do to the data? Anybody?
You can sort it.
I can sort it. So I can, up here, just play with these arrows. These icons, you can't hurt anything, right? I can do smallest to largest, or I can do largest to smallest. Okay. So we're going to put chocolate chips at the top. Now, to your question about it intuitively put it in the best format for the data, right? But say for some reason you want something different, then you can go over here, click, right? And you can, for the pie chart, right, use the measure. Okay. Why is that visualization not so hot?
Because there's so many inventory items.
There's so many items. The data, if you put labels on this, it's going to be sitting all over itself, right? It's going to be hard to relate to. There aren't any category names. So if you want to go back, right, I can just click the back arrow and bring it out.
Professor Close, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So this question asks specifically for July.
Right.
And it just so happens that like without the filter, it's still chocolate chips, but for July,
Yeah.
I kind of sorted, or I filtered the invoice line transaction date.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like the appropriate approach.
Yes. But the point being is too, when I did this one, it's like, there's a couple ways to do this one effectively, right? So, filters are when we want to grab stuff out, right? So I'm going to look for, they wanted in July, right? So Alexa's right. The answer is kind of the same, but we want to look for the transaction ID by date and move it up to here. That's the filter. So that's just like in your pivot table in Excel, it's going to give you the results. Now, what I didn't like about this is in this version, um, you in other versions, you can right click and it basically says by month or relevance, and you'll be able to enter July and pick it. So the easiest way, which I will totally accept, is you go down and pick every month in July. Is that what you want to? That's because you can do this because there's only 30 transactions. Do you want to do this in a big database? No. So then you're going to create a calculated field. And typically it's the function is data trunk. Now, I'm not covering a lot of functions in this because I just want to really drive home the points of visualization and reading. But I could create a field that said data trunk and then pull in the transaction date, and it would sort them all into months. The other way, I want you to do things right now that are just easier for you. So if I click all the July dates and hit apply, right, it's going to sort them according just to the month of July. All right. The other way, and I actually use this one quite a bit, is you can go in, right, edit filter. This is where I talk about, I'm going to take none to use them all. This is where I talk about, I love my Excel data so much better, right? So I am going to go into transaction date, and I can still do this by using my shortcuts. Um, and I'm just going to highlight July, right? So I could use, if you're better with Excel commands, you can go in and highlight these, copy them, go back into your Tableau, hit custom, go into this yellow box, right click, paste, apply, and hit OK. And it will do the same thing. So, and you can, it depends not just on the size of your data, but look for ways to get it done easy as you're learning and then start to tackle calculations. Because some of the issues with calculations, and this is why beyond sum or convert to measure, we haven't done too many, is the syntax and is what kind of data is in your underlying set. So sometimes we need numbers and we might find that the data in Excel is a text. Well, guess what we have to do? We really should go back. I usually go back to the source of the data and I convert from text to number, right? Which is something we do in Excel all the time. Like I said, it was meant to be a stretch, but you're rising to the occasion. So take these tips about visualization. When you get to 17, when you get to all of them, right? Now, from now on, really look and say, is that easy to read? Is that telling the story? Can I squish this using a technical term, squish it onto a dashboard, right? So maybe this dashboard, if it was an informational dashboard, we would have this one at top and then maybe several little ones. So the next phase in 17 is you get to be a designer, right, of telling the story. The last thing I want to mention, some still haven't seen this, is where do you name your sheet? Go down to the tab, just like in Excel, right click, rename it. So this one was chapter 10, Q1, right? and hit enter, and the name will appear up there.